In this panel, we will reflect mainly through case studies and experience on how our project, based on short-term temporalities, such as biennials or nomadic art projects, can interact with local conditions, communities, and territories in order to become mediators and facilitators of cultural and social change. Of course, we are interested through your case history to understand how you relate with independent or codependent or interdependent cultural realities, but also social context that might be from time to time be very different. And to shape the conversation, we can revolve around some couple of terms that can bring up complexities and contradictions. As we have seen this morning, contradictions are something that is very fertile and doesn't need to be solved and doesn't need to be hidden and doesn't need an answer. So complexities and contradictions in order to bring up new experimentations and models capable to, even if partially, overcome this contradiction. So we've sent to our panelists a couple of terms that are in between which we hope the discussion will develop, which are institutional and independent. How can an institutional event such as a biennale, often promoted and financed by local or national political agents, bring forward non-institutional narratives? On the other hand, can small-scale independent art projects relate to communities, and how? The second one, so small-scale independent nomadic art projects. The second one is temporary and permanent. So how can our temporary project reconcile the need for the artistic momentum with issues brought out from the local communities, often based on long-term and multifaceted issues? On the other hand, how can permanent art projects remain relevant through time? So we're really thinking between these two terms. So if of course, the Biennale is a highlight, and then the Biennale ends, and what is left on the context, in the territory, and how these small projects that maybe are connected to bigger events, how can remain relevant and active. Third two terms are, of course, local and global. This is very transversal to everything that it's been said here. How do curators and organizers mediate between the issues and discourse of international contemporary art and the local audiences and communities? What are the processes to establish the Biennale model in places that are highly decentralized for the mainstream art system while still being recognized from both? So I thank you very much, the panelists, for being here. I will introduce them each by one. Our first contributors is Hedwig Fienne. She is founding in digital, which I thank very much for accepting this invitation. Of course, the Manifesta model is the head of all the ways that Biennale used today, and it's a model that it was born nomadic, and in the last years has become more and more in relation to local communities, to concepts such as mediation, education, social change, etc. So Hedwig Fienne, I don't know if she can connect. She's founding director of Manifesta, and she founded it in Rotterdam in 1993. Over this period, Fienne has transformed the biennial from a contemporary art platform into an interdisciplinary platform for social cultural change. She is currently working on the concurrent edition of Manifesta 14, hosted in the city of Pristina, Manifesta 15, to be hosted in the city of Barcelona 2024, and Manifesta 16 in the Ruhr area. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Hi Giovanna, come stai?
Bene, grazie.
Tutto a posto. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am speaking from Amsterdam. In 1 week, I'm permanently in Pristina, but I'm still in Amsterdam. And thank you so much for inviting Manifesta. I speak on behalf of my entire team. And I think the topics of this discussion is extremely relevant. And specifically, the three topics you just mentioned are very much related to the key topics in Manifesta, because as you may know, Manifesta is the only nomadic biennial in the world, actually, and also the only biennial which focuses on investigating cultural DNA in a changing socio-political context. And since I only have like 15 minutes, I would like to focus specifically on the three topics. And I presented a few slides because I think the three topics which were mentioned for this discussion: institutional versus independentism, temporarily versus permanent. Well, that's exactly what the Manifesta is about, and the influence and the relevance of global and local. And I think this is where Manifesta starts. If we do a small introduction of those who haven't been into Manifesta, I think many of you who are in the conference have been in Palermo, Manifesta 12, and I see even our general coordinator, Francesca Verga, is there. Manifesta 12 is for us a kind of césure. It's a kind of a watershed moment because we radically started to become interdisciplinary and including, let's say, this model of engaged autonomy, also because of the role of Leo Luca Orlando, the mayor, whom we sometimes call the fourth curator. And this engaged autonomy is very much like related to the issue that Manifesta moves from one place to another and needs to be site-specific and needs to be embedded in the local administration and in the local cultural ecosystem. Otherwise, nothing can be done of any of the ambitions Manifesta has set forth. So here you see the overview of the projects and the last three projects we are working on, some of the facts and figures, also to see a little bit of the geographical spread through Manifesta. 200,000 visits. It's like becoming a little bit bigger every 2 years. But in Manifesta 12, Manifesta 13, we really tried. Manifesta 13 took place in Marsiglia. We tried to change our methodology. Why? Because Manifesta 12 was very much also related to the topic of the Biennale, reclaiming public space, an idea of Leo Luca Orlando himself, but also in Manifesta 13, when we arrived in the middle of the pandemic, we decided actually that the pre-biennial research process needs to be completely different than any at this moment of any of the biennales do this. And why the reaction is always, why is it so needed to organize this pre-biennial research so differently? Why not just appoint a curator? She appoints the artist, you work with the artist, you create exhibitions, and that's it. And Manifesta, since in its origin is a nomadic event, we think we're not born to do this because there are many museums and institutions locally who can do this task better. So Manifesta is actually invited to host cities with a very special task, with a very special position, mostly to act as an incubator, as we normally say, as a kind of facilitator for change. Sometimes cultural, artistic change, sometimes social, cultural change, sometimes also really focusing on urbanistic change. And this is what you see in this slide. I created this slide much more also to communicate to the outside world. Why is this methodology? And this is very much related to this first topic, institutional or independence. Why is this methodology so differently? And if I answer this first topic, we call this engaged autonomy, is like, and I can give you some examples to make it less abstract. We decided since Manifesta 12 to commission before we even started Biennale, an urban vision. And the urban vision in Manifesta 12 in Palermo was done by Rem Koolhaas together with Polito Pestellini. In Manifesta 13, it was Vinnie Maas in Marsiglia. And in Manifesta 14, we did an urban study together with Carlo Ratti, an architect and urbanist from Torino. What these studies are not only technical studies, but these are mostly more holistic approach. This means that these architects, urbanists study very, let's say, concretely what, where are we, what are the key issues pending in these cities on many different topics. Can be on climate change, ecology, can be on social circumstances, can be on equality, gender issues, can also be on ethnic issues, can be on religion, but also of ability, on greening the city, circular building. And most of the time we do like a symbolic intervention. We did this in Palermo, but we also did this in Marseille and with Carlo Ratti. Out of this urban vision is coming like a set of, let's say, conditions where we think Manifesta can be, let's say, relevant and linking to the interest of what citizens, communities, neighborhoods, and the administration. And that's my point, my reaction on the first institutional, what the administration could imagine Manifesta as its ambitions and its goals. Because if you say, isn't there a lot of dependence from the administration? Can you be critical in your narrative if you have to work with an administration? I think we proved this very clearly in Manifesta 10, which took place in 2014, 8 years ago, in St. Petersburg. One can hardly imagine that we were there, because there we said we do everything in close communication with the Hermitage, which was at that moment our partner, but only if we can critical responses and critical answers in an autonomous way to everything we faces or everything we experience. And that has been our kind of life sentence for all the editions after Manifesta 10. So even if we work together with the administration to make sure that our plans, let's say Carlo Ratti's plans, who wanted to create like a green corridor in the city of Pristina, that these plans are really implemented, one needs to work together with the city hall, with the administration, and with the different departments in the administration. But as I said before, always with a critical point of view. And not always this was like accepted, because in Manifesta 13 in Marsiglia, Vinnie Maas was very critical about the last 25 years Republican architectural and urbanistic plans of the city of Marseille, and that was almost ending up in a boycott from the city towards the urban vision of Vinnie Maas. So it cannot always go right, but it's maybe a clear example why Manifesta does what she does, and also how this relates, because if we stay to the model of Manifesta 14, the urban vision of Carlo Ratti has not only given us the venues, but also the long-term plans of possible venues which we are going to use for the Manifesta. So the Hifzi Suleimani Library, which is going to be turned into a permanent space. The brick factory, a former stone factory, which we are going to revitalize with the project of Raumlabor Berlin. But also like the 23 venues in the city, which hopefully are examples of reclaiming public space, circular building, artistic interventions, and how, in terms of mobility and diversity and inclusivity, include communities. So this kind of urban visions have all the three last editions in mutual research. But if you see from the moment of temporality and permanency, I think we learned a lot in Marsiglia, Because in Marsilia, Manifesta started when the Yellow Vest, the big protest movement, started in France. And it was very clear that we needed to find a methodology to involve citizens. Not like the artist only, not like the elite who goes to exhibitions, and not the administration, but like this, the general group of citizens. And we connected to a series of political activists and groups in Marsilia who are organizing citizen assemblies. And with them, we organized a series of workshops with more than 200 citizens in terms of identifying what is the relevance of the city of Marseille, where are the problems coming from, and how can Manifesta act as an incubator for this change of the city. And out of this workshop came like a whole series of manifestos, ideas, which were presented to the new city administration. And to make a long story short, the city administration was so impressed by the ideas of the local communities that they created a permanent, let's say, assembly for citizens who can voluntarily or not voluntarily give advice to the real selected democratic assembly in the city. And sometimes these kind of elements show that sometimes symbolic interventions can become permanent institutions. And this is also bringing me to the next level, which you see in this slide. Hopefully, it's visible in the conference. In Manifest 13 and 14, we started also with expectation workshops. We invited like people from 10 different groups: artists, producers, ecologists, political activists, teachers, professors, but also like people working in the social civic society sector, to give us ideas about what they thought was important in the transformation of their city. And out of this, we went into an action research, which is mostly saying, how can we also take like a very critical point of view? So by analyzing all these kind of outcomes and findings, we said ourselves, okay, what is our point of view and how can we create the conceptual parameters of the Biennale? So this is all taking place before artists, curators, creative mediators. It's actually creating the framework in which artists, creative mediators, and other culture practitioners can start working. And also in Pristina, we did a citizen consultation, which was actually done by an architect, Arna Macic, who's coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And she did also, together with a local organization, a public survey where we investigated ideas from more than 1,000 citizens from Pristina, Fuskosova, Mitrovica, and some areas around. What is the status of your well-being? How much transparency in decision-making procedures is there? What are the ecological plans the city has, and how do you agree to this? What is the status of diversity and inclusivity? So all these topics were discussed, and these findings were put in a brief, which I gave to the creative mediator and Carlo Ratti to say, these are elements which we really would like you to take as kind of framework for selecting projects, artistic events, so that the Manifesta ideas and the Manifesta as a Biennale really serves and integrates the needs, the interests, but also the relevant topics. And that brings me to maybe the last part of what we did in Pristina, but also in other parts of other Manifesta editions, that we are really looking at how can Manifesta become radical, local. And I know there is a lot of criticism on the kind of global focus of Documenta, Venice Biennale. For us, it was mostly, since we are nomadic and not always taking place in Venice or not always taking place in Kassel, we need to embed ourselves in the local community. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense at all what we are doing. And this is also the site specificity and the radical localness has already resulted in Marsilia that more than 20% of all our participants, so this can be ecologists, biologists, artists, but also collectives, were coming from the south of France and the region. And we created a very special project for this, but also saying there's no hierarchy anymore, like what you see in Venice or in other projects. You have the main curated project, and then you have a second part in the hierarchy, the collateral project, which are mostly the local projects. What we started to do is say, no, we don't want to make this kind of division between, because who says and who decides the level of quality for locality or the level of quality of global participation. So we said very clearly to also as a kind of a statement, we want in Marsilia, we want people coming, collectives of artists or ecologists working with us from different parts of the region to be on the same level as the international artists participating. And this we also did in Kosovo. We invited, we did an open call and more than 108 people presented projects, and out of this more than 15 collectives and projects were presented, and they were, let's say, integrated in the entire biennial program. So there's no division of what is coming from a local perspective or what is coming from a global perspective. There was already criticism, like Manifesta needs to choose if she is an international biennial or she's becoming a local site event. For me, this is completely irrelevant. I think in the nomadic, in the fact that the origin of our biennale is that we are nomadic, if we want to create a meaningful presentation, a meaningful, let's say, even legacy, we need to invest in the local ecosystem. And this is also maybe my last point, and then I think my 15 minutes are over. After Palermo, where we did a beautiful project in the Teatro Garibaldi, you see that if the political scenario changes, then it's very difficult to follow up for long-term implementation of the project inside the city hall. And what we try to do, we learned this also in Marsilia, although one of our projects, Le Tiers Cuchier, the third road, this was an education project in a social deprived neighborhood, and we were able to continue it even now, 2 years after the closure of Manifesta 13. But what we did in this edition, that I started with saying one of the goals of Manifesta 14 in Pristina is like opening up a permanent space, not like really an art space or a museum, because that's not Manifesta's role, but let's like experiment with the interdisciplinarity. What sort of needs do the local communities have? And this was also the outcome of the public survey, the citizen assembly, the action research, the urban vision. That in Pristina there was a kind of a need of more like a mediation community space, which is now called the Center of Narrative Practice, an oasis. And we hope that this space, in the form of a making space, so also very much focusing on co-production with local initiative and run by our former team, Manifesta Kosovar team, that this will be a sponsored institution which will also continue to exist after Manifesta is closed at the end of November. So this was my contribution. I hope there were some topics which could be relevant for the later discussion, and thank you so much.
Does it work? No. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much, Hedwig. That was surely very interesting, and it gives us many issues on which to go on with our discussion. Since Hedwig can't join us for the whole table, I just wanted to know if someone in the public has questions now. Okay, so thank you very much. And now I will thank you for being with us. And so now I give you the word to another Biennale, a very different one, but for coincidence, taking part in the same area of the world. It's called Biennale Autostrada, which I realize now I didn't ask you why this name, so we can start from that. And we have with us physically, and we thank them very much for doing the trip, just to be here with us, Lotrim Fischecu and Vatra Abrashi. Lotrim is a co-founder and executive director of Autostrada Biennale, and he is also the founder and director of the other project of Autostrada Biennale, Autostrada Hangar, another coincidence. So and it's a permanent exhibition and production space in the former German Four military base, which now it's called Innovation and Training Park in Prison. And Vatra is also co-founder and education director of Autostrada Biennale and Autostrada Hangar, and she has a background in pedagogy and speech therapy. And so please tell us about your project and all the issues that, some of the issues that came out with Manifesta, being Manifesta this year in Kosovo. Probably you can give us some hints from a different point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We are so happy with Vatra to be here as two co-founders of Autostrada Biennale. And maybe I can start from your questions about Autostrada Biennale, why we named it and how we started. But also we would love to show a video, if we have sound. It's a very short video, and then we will go on with the presentation.
Kjo ka qenë për neve synimi kryesor që të rinjve t'ju ofrojmë një hapësirë e cila do t'i ketë të gjitha pajisjet e nevojshme për me u shkatësu në departamentet, drejtimet të cilat ata kanë interes dhe ju pëlqejnë, duke angazhuar ekspertë të fushave të ndryshme.
We started with some online classes where I instructed the students concepts behind craftsmanship, the use of some of the tools. I familiarized them with many of the techniques and tools online, and then we came here into the shop to work on some projects in regards to the meeting point we have for Autostrada Biennale. We're working on some tables and chairs and a combination of things that the students came together.
Pjesa e cila është duke implementu për momentin janë pjesa e programimit së bashku me elektronikën, ku jemi duke kriju disa sisteme automatike për kontrollim të dritave në mënyrë automatike, matja e lagështisë dhe temperaturës dhe paraqitja e rezultateve në një LCD screen dhe ujitja automatike e tokës në bazë të vlerave që marrin nga senzori.
Pjesë e programit janë 60 të ri të departamenteve të ndryshme, kështu që prej tyre më gëzon fakti që mbi 90% janë gra, të cilat kanë aplikuar në programet tona.
Për ne është shumë e rëndësishme që të krijojmë ekipe në mënyrë që të krijojmë edhe kulturë të bashkëpunimit, të kulturë të shkëmbimit të ideve, të dijes, dhe të krijojmë përvoja të reja, të cilat na shtyjnë neve që të bashkëjetojmë dhe të veprojmë duke krijuar dhe jo vetëm të konsumuar.
pjesa e cilën neve na bën shumë të lumtun si organizator është përshtypjet të cilat i kemi marrë nga të rinjat, të cilët po i shijojnë këto workshope, po përfitojnë prej tyre njohurisë dhe po shkatësohen, sidomos për profesionet të cilat ndërlidhen me artin, inovacionin dhe teknologjinë. Autostrada Hangar është shembull se si një hapësirë duhet të krijohet në formë që t'i përgjigjet komunitetit, duke qenë kreativ, unik dhe përshtatshme për nevojat që i ka. Ku me këtë rast ne i falenderojmë të gjithë ata të cilët kanë kontribuar në realizimin e këtij projekti madhor, i cili është shndruar në një mision për të gjithë ne dhe dëshmon faktin se si me motiv shumë të madh, guxim, vullnet dhe konsistencë, gjëra të mëdha mund të realizohen.
Thank you very much. We wanted to start with the video, which shows recent developments of Autostrada Biennale as an institution with its permanent space, education, production, and exhibition space. But going back to your question from the beginning, our idea was to create a Biennale that will come up with an idea of being a regional project. So that's why we named it Autostrada Biennale, and it's not as 99% of other biennales are like named with the city name. And so we came up with creating Autostrada Biennale as an innovative highway between Istanbul Biennale and Venice Biennale, because in the region of the whole Balkan we don't have any other Biennale except the Greece. So Autostrada Biennale started in Prizren in Kosovo in 2014. With its first Biennale edition opening in 2017. It was built in the need of more cultural exchange in the region and with the world. It established itself as a connecting point, a route of the map of Western Balkans and Europe. As the only contemporary art institution in Prizren, Autostrada Biennale functions on two speeds. One is the physical exhibition that takes place every 2 years, since 2017, and the other is our new education, production, and exhibition space that you just saw on the video, which is in the former KFOR military camp, now ITP, Innovation and Training Park. We are so happy that with the letter, we have extended our publicness of our platform by considering art production as a sustainable form of learning and exchange that will address the needs of the communities. And of course, we are very happy that we opened it on March this year. Coincidentally, the new war started in Ukraine at the time, and we were, after 20 years of the war in Kosovo, we reclaimed, let's say, our spaces by bringing the freshness and bringing the culture and education in the military camps. So this was so important to open this coincidentally in this time of a new war, but of course we proudly opened it, you know, and it was a strong message, we believe, to the world of after 20 years reclaiming the spaces and coming up with the education and production space, especially on contemporary art. And so going back to how we started and how we engaged the community, because I still remember the days that we were talking of creating a Biennale in Kosovo in the Western Balkans, and the critics were like kind of, you don't have audience and there is no gallery in the Prizren and you want to do a Biennale. And we were saying that exactly while these are not there, we have to do this. So otherwise, it's not going to come from foreigners. We are the ones that we are going to build and create things in Kosovo. And we started in the city that has no gallery by opening the city itself as an open museum and an open gallery. So our main venues were, let's say, the bus station, historical zone of Prizren, the castle. And in between these two, we managed to open a lot of gardens, houses. So we were completely engaging community to developing the Biennale, the contemporary art. So this was also the message to the ones that said that there is no audience. So the audience was part of the developing the Biennale itself. And so this was much meaningful, especially in Kosovo, you know. And of course, the education programs that Vatra will talk much more on this later was very important because we see the art production as a process of education as well itself, you know. And so, after our first edition, we extended in our second edition, we opened new spaces. And one of the new venues was also a rooftop of one of the gymnasiums of schools. So directly by engaging artists and producing artworks together with students there and kids as well was so important as well. And then this was the point where we really came up with an idea of every year to extend the venues, to extend the edition. And then in the third edition, we made possible Autostrada Biennale, not just in Prizren, but also in another two cities, in Pristina and in Peja. So this was one of the photos that you can see, the sunflower field in Pristina, and from Agnes Dennis, a well-known artist. Now she's 91 years old. Maybe some of you students or professionals can remember this artwork because this was, not this artwork, but Agnes Dennis had created the wheat field in Milano in 2015 when it was the Expo. So it was a huge project, I guess, here, environmental and artistic project. And then she came up with a new idea of creating this artwork in Pristina, but also in Prizren. In Prizren was in the city, river, and then in Pristina was in the middle, which is now Youth and Sports Palace. So this project was one of the projects, environmental projects that we have done in Pristina. And maybe we can continue with slides. And this one is also very important. It's Alvaro Urbano and Petrit Halilai's work after their exhibition in Madrid with the big flowers. We made possible to bring these flowers in Pristina and to open for the public in the National Library. So it was very meaningful also that is happening in Pristina, in Petrit Halilai's hometown, because Petrit is living in Berlin and is a Kosovar artist. And yeah, and also this was so important as an artwork to raise awareness of the LGBT community itself. So, I mean, I can continue also like kind of talking about the whole artworks that have their impacts, you know, in the community and social impact, but also as a Biennale itself, when you organize it in the three cities, it has an economic impact as well to the cities and to develop the audiences. And in this slide, you can see also, you can see also one of the artworks that is now, that is created in Kosovo. It's Malgorzata Mirgataş's work. She created these artworks in the first days of our hangar, inside the hangar, with 30 women from the community of Roma community, let's say. And this artwork is partly now in Venice Biennale showed, in the Polish pavilion, where Joanna Warsza, our curator, a third edition and fourth edition curator, is also creating a Polish pavilion. So a third edition of Autostrada Biennale was created from Evildur Musholu and Joanna Warsza, both living in Berlin. As we started working with them in the time of pandemics, we were thinking all the time, what if the pandemic will continue and the international artists won't be able to come to Kosovo? And then we came up to the idea of creating this tandem biennale. So we created the collaboration between international artists and the local ones. The local ones, that didn't have to be, let's say, just the contemporary artists, but activists, researchers, So the local organizations as well, so the ones that were pushing to make it possible in the local context. And so this brought us to the new ideas of collaborations, which is so important to create this connection between international artists and the local ones. And this was very successful. For example, I can take one of the examples that is in the screening. An artist, a Brazilian artist, Camila Roca, sent her drawings to the filigree shop, and the filigree shop in Prizren created her artwork. So this is one of the good examples of this, how the tandem Biennale was functioning during the pandemic time. Yeah, and how we engaged locals and collaborated directly with local producers in order to reinforce, especially the youth of Kosovo and the students. And then, of course, we have extended our collaboration by universities and educational institutions. And therefore, we created also the huge space in Autostrada Hangar to have the ongoing programs. So now at the moment, Autostrada Biennale, even though it started as a Biennale, we have now our institution, Autostrada Hangar, and we are functioning every day. So we are, beside of being just a Biennale that functions every 2 years and have exhibition every 2 years, now we have ongoing education and production programs in our hangar. And so, yeah, I mean, these are some of the key things that I wanted to share with you, our process, and maybe we can also, I can show maybe the spaces and some of statistics of how we grow up our show back. I can show you, for example, Armea Kufive was a name of the title of the first edition, The Future of Borders, where we had 40,000 visitors in different places, as you can see also the venues. Then in second edition, we had 48,000 visitors. So we increased the number of exhibition as well, the venues. And then in our third edition last year, we had 17 exhibition venues in Prizren, 2 in Pristina, and 1 in Peja. So the number was doubled. So yeah, this is how we grew up our Biennale and how we came up on the idea of extending it also to another cities. And now we are working with our 2 curators. And we are in the research program at the moment, curatorial research program, and we are trying to extend it in the other cities of Kosovo. And third edition will be held next year from 1st of July, till the 2nd of September. So it's going to be 2 months Biennale. So yeah, maybe I can give floor a bit to Vatra. Maybe she can talk about the education process and the education programs and how we are trying to extend our public program, which we saw that is so important to extend. And also maybe she can say more about how we developed Hangar, because Hangar itself was not developed as just as an institution, like just contracting companies, but through the education program. So,
yeah. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and very pleased for this invitation. From the first, as Leo mentioned a lot, how we started. From the first edition, we paid a lot of intention to be very inclusive project and to involve schools, universities, and communities. So all the activities that we have organized, we went to the communities, we went to the people, we engaged them in our exhibition. So people were also the ones who presented the artworks, because the artworks were in their yard, in their house, or inside the city neighborhoods. So we engaged a lot of people, but we didn't have a lot of budget when we started for the first edition, but we did a lot of group visits by bringing all schools from Prizren and from Kosovo, but also from universities, the teachers, and we had a lot of discussion during the first edition, and then we continued to the second edition because we saw that youngsters need to be part of this kind of events and workshops. We had a lot of questions from youngsters, from kids, because in their art lessons in schools, they didn't teach nothing about the exhibition, and they were like shocked about what is an exhibition. They had a lot of questions about the exhibition, about the different topics, and about the social aspect of the artworks. So in second edition, we paid attention in non-formal education program, in public programs. So every week we had a discussion with youngsters from the gymnasium to discuss the context of social aspect of each artwork. So in every venue we went together with youngsters, and we had a critic discussion with them in order to discuss the context, local context of an artworks and social aspect. And then we saw that in every edition we had a lot of youngsters that applied to be part of Autostrada Biennale. They were with master degrees or bachelor, but when it came to practical work, we saw that they lack a lot, and they need the support. That's why this project of Autostrada Hangar came as a need, as our response to the needs to the youngsters. And then we started to design a project, education project in skills building, with skills building workshops. And we invited a lot of experts from all over the world, and also local experts, in order to work with youngsters. And in first phase, we had 60 youngsters in 3 departments. The first department was in the wood, metal, and textile. Second one was in multimedia communication, and third one was in technology. So the aim was not just to teach to them the technical part, but also to make them think a bit outside the box, and to make them discuss together, and also to work together, because most of the time youngsters and also people that work in creative and cultural industry, they see themselves as individuals and not so much as a part of the larger group. So we wanted, with this project, making it together, that we brought all together youngsters in order to work, think, and also produce. So we are very happy that this Autostrada Hangar project was built and created together with youngsters and experts. So with 50% of the materials that were recycled from previous edition of Autostrada Biennale. So with a very low cost, we created this space, and all youngsters were part of it, and everything is on wheels, so it's movable, and you can change all the setup of the space. For example, we have movable kitchen, library, co-working space. We separate the atelier part. Here you can see we have an artwork with mosaic from a local artist in bathroom. So we have 2 balconies that are also co-working space. And technology lab, also the atelier part. So the whole 3rd edition was created here in Autostrada Hangar. And after we finished the 3rd edition, we started to create all the infrastructural hangar together with youngsters. So these are the functions of the space. And also now the new project is Green Pavilion that we are developing together with our partners, where we will treat a lot of other environmental projects. So here is the field, and 2 days ago, we planted sunflower field because we want to continue with the Agnes Dennis project. So now we are waiting that we will have a sunflower next month or maybe next 2 months. Thank you. I hope that we didn't spend too time.
Thank you very much. This was extremely interesting and really answered to our one of our questions of how to deal with long-term project, and I think this production space also has a lot of suggestions with the third table regarding how to relate to how the architects and then the architecture and the subject of space interacts with this art project. Thank you very much. So now I would invite to talk Lucrezia Cipitelli, another biennial, then we're done with the biennials. And Lucrezia is a cultural activist, scholar, PhD, and co-director of ArtHub, and she is currently curator of the 7 Lubumbashi Biennial in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and artistic director of Atelier Picha, a long-term site-specific educational program in Picha, in Lubumbashi. Picha is the artist-led organization which runs Lubumbashi Biennial, and she is also professor of aesthetics at the Accademia di Brera in Milano. So thank you very much for being with us.
This passage of the microphone is very fun. We share. Okay, thank you so much. I didn't bring images because I thought the time was very short, so I'd like to pinpoint some issues and maybe then we can discuss it also together, I hope. I have to thank Marianna for getting me here and Giovanna as well. I mean, it's very interesting to be here. I think I also need to frame myself because I'm Italian and white, and I'm presented as the curator of a biennale in Congo, so I think I need somehow to say a few words. Well, initially, I live in Milan, I'm a professor, my students are there, I mean, we did classes together, so I'm an art historian. Through time, I got somehow, I approached the topic of Africa and modern and contemporary art in Africa. And for me, as an Italian scholar of art history, we were talking about it. I had a formal education where everything was clear and without question. Like methodologically in Italy, we didn't ask ourselves so many questions about what is art, what is not art, why a museum is a museum and it contains certain objects and not others. So let's say for me the topic of Africa was a way of understanding how we as European created ourselves through the history of some specific objects to which we add a specific value. Working to this research, I had the chance to bump into Havana Biennale at first. My mother is half from Argentina, so I have this lucky experience in my life of questioning myself at least a little bit, because being from Rome and studying art history from Rome in Italy is like you never ask yourself any question somehow. So the presence of my mother and the family in Argentina helped me to at least open up a bit the box. And when you open it up, you get a lot of questions and very few answers. But then this path somehow led me to meet people. So this is my cultural pedigree, but as, let's say, a curator, I can say that I understood how I like to do things because I've been in contact with the Havana Biennale, and there I met the curatorial committee. I don't know if you are familiar with the Biennale, but it's a very old one. It was set up in the 80s as a kind of third world perspective on contemporary art, written and defended by scholars and curators who are from the third world. I use this term, third world, because they define themselves like that, and because it connects to a broader point of view of global history, which is like the three-continental and post-colonial and decolonial struggles of the 50s and 60s, where the third world was also not only a different position between the bipolar West capitalist and the Eastern Front, but it was also the perspective of the former colonies. So the discourse of Havana Biennale is strictly connected with post-colonial discourse, and this is also what informed myself as somebody who's trying to contextualize her Eurocentric perspective. In the Biennale, so I met this cultural perspective, but I also met curators who were doing things without money and looking for relevance. And one of the examples I remember, which for me was very important, is in the third Biennale, or the second, Gillian Janes, the by then director, an art historian from La Habana, one of the founders of the Havana Biennale. She invited a conceptual artist from Argentina, Victor Grippo. They didn't have money. They had to have him in the house of a friend. And when he decided what he wanted to do, he wanted to build a huge table inside the venue of the Biennale, which is the old colonial castle of La Habana. He was looking for means or ways to build up this table. And in the end, he told the guy he was living with, and the guy said, okay, I asked my peers in the neighborhood. So basically, the construction of his work, this huge table, was a neighborhood participative event where all the people of the neighborhood brought their table from the kitchen to the venue of the Havana Biennale to set up this installation. And I think this is really something, because it really means that when you need to say something, you find your ways and your means. So for me, this was also a very important part of my education. Just all this to say that my presence in Lubumbashi is a presence which is related with comrades and friends, and not as a professional curator who comes from Europe to say something interesting. And my work with them started in 2017. By then I was just back in Europe. After 3 years I spent teaching in the University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. But my friends in Belgium, before I was living in Brussels, I met this community of African artists who were going back and forth from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some of them, they were from Lubumbashi, and they told me, hey, why don't you come and visit us just to see what we do? And I think it will be interesting for you just to better know also some part of Africa you don't know. So my first time there was in 2017. Since I was an art historian, I helped out just supporting young artists and their way of working. And this is how they told me, yeah, why don't you stay and think about an educational program to do together. So in the next edition of the Biennale in 2019, I set up a program where I thought that it was interesting to have 10 artists, very young from Congo, working together to site-specific projects led by other Congolese artists who were coming to Lubumbashi. And we did 3 projects, and each project was basically focused on forgetting technicalities and specializations and working on how everybody can add something to a common pot. It went quite well. It was during the 6th Biennale, where the curator, by then, Sandrine Collard de Bock, which is a scholar, a curator of Congolese descent, made a very global international biennale with 40 artists from all over the world, very big names. It was very successful. But then we even had like reviews on the New York Times and Le Monde. It was fantastic. But then after this, we were all broke, like completely disappointed, tired, and we felt that we were doing something for somebody else. And I talk about myself because, being my comrades, we were all living and thinking together, but I especially talk about PICCA, which is the organization which leads the Biennale. And unlike other Biennale in Africa, like I can remind you the Dakar Biennale, which was set up in 1992, as a Pan-African Biennale set up by the government with a very specific identitarian politics, which was we are like the leading country in Africa which can bring the flag of Africanness to the world, and this is our identity, is Pan-Africanist. I'm a bit simplifying, but somehow the cultural need of the post-decolonization Senegal, led by Léopold Sédar Senghor, was a bit moving towards this direction. The identitarian politics was also supportive of cultural production. So in Dakar, the Biennale is a state thing. In Lubumbashi, the Biennale is a grassroots organization set up by a group of artists who were 20 in the 90s, and who called themselves as a collective Picha, because Picha is the Swahili word for picture. And picture is the image that you can draw, but it's also the image, is the photographic image. And producing images for them meant decolonizing the imageries about themselves and Africa, and imageries which were constructed during the colony and after, in our present, which is a never-ending present of post-colonization or capitalist neo-colonization. So for them to produce pictures of themselves and their city meant not only decoding the way the city was built up, but also decoding the way they were educated, like the church, the Catholic Church, like the bande dessinée, the comics produced in Belgium, which were bringing into the colonies a kind of ethics, Catholic ethics of the good colonized, which goes to the school, learn how to be Christian and a good person, and live in this colonized setup. So for them, picture was really a way of decoding and transgress and recoding an identity, which was the identity of 20 years old people who wanted to be artists or cultural producers, but they didn't really agree of the way they were educated. And something also interesting, since we are talking about a city, is that Lubumbashi is like the reason why King Leopold became emperor and basically occupied this whole region, which now we call Congo. Lubumbashi was the former Elisabethville, and it was born as a segregated city. It was the city built up around a hill, which is a fake hill, but it's like the national monument, and is the hill, the Terril, which was constructed by digging into the land the moment they found the copper. We are in the 70s of the 19th century, so finding the copper in Africa and sell it to Europe means to build up the industrial revolution in Europe. When we talk about the roots of modernism, we always think about the train, the factories, and the Ville Lumière in France, in Paris. Like the copper of Elisabethville is the other dark side, as Mignolo said, of the modernism, which we never see. So for me to work there meant specifically to learn a lot of things about, again, myself and my Eurocentric perspective. And for them, to build up images around a segregated city meant also to understand how the segregated city was built up. So it was a city where the indigenous people were living around the Terril, the area of the copper mines. And then there was an empty space 1 kilometer deep, because the scientists by then could demonstrate, apparently, that a mosquito could not fly more than 700 meters. So it was a way to sanitize the white city, the Belgian city, from the black city, and not to share the same mosquitoes. And when taking pictures of this city, for the Institut Français, for the international newspapers. The people of Piccha, by taking these pictures for foreigners, understood their own city. So, like, the picture is also the picture that helps you to identify yourself with a space, which is not a space you built up, but is a space that narrated your body. And for them, the city is really the space where things happen. So Piccha was born as an art event invented by a group of cultural activists who were interested in the images as a medium and in the city as a space, as a stage. And this is like the heritage. But the question now, after 2019 and 2020, especially with the lockdown and the COVID, was how to make this possible, how not to get completely wasted after a successful international biennale with many interesting names and with such an interesting hot topics like which touches colony, decolonization, blackness, race, gender, etc. And one point that we built up together was that we wanted to do something very low profile and very slow. And here the community building passes through education, maybe. And the point is that we decided to do small projects, to invite foreigner artists only to sit together for a long time and leave something which can lead to a sustainable future. For instance, we are setting up a Lubumbashi Film Society, which is a space which researches alternative models of cinema in Congo, and which will stay after the Biennale as a space collectively run by a group of people which was set up during this long-term process. Or another project we are doing together is called Une Maison en Commun, a house in common. And believe me, already to have there the electricity working, because we use solar panels now, and internet is already something, because it means that we can have people coming there and studying and being connected to the internet, because the internet is very expensive in Congo. So our response was slow down everything and try to construct little things which may support the space, Piccha art space itself. And there is maybe another point that is interesting to point out, and then I don't know if I will leave the microphone again. Well, is the fact, for instance, that we are trying to make agreement with some international art spaces in a way that asking financial support for Piccha and for the Biennale, we ask mainly the support for local artists to be produced, because one of the points for us, which was very also complicated, is that we always had artists from Switzerland, Norway, United States, France, Belgium, Netherlands, coming, because it's where it is more or less easy to find money. But then it was always a struggle to find money to support local artists. And then the way I prefer to work is really to make agreement and find money for local artists to produce their work for the Biennale, and then this work will be shown after the Biennale abroad. Like we did an agreement like that with Framer Framed in Amsterdam, and with that we are promoting the career of 4 artists which are in their 30s. They are quite known in Lubumbashi, but they still need this space to go out. So for us, this was also a very important part, reconsidering the Biennale as a moment where you can really also support local artists. I will stop here. I know that there are many things to say, but I just wanted to quickly point out a bit of a story, and maybe we can discuss later. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lucrezia. That was really inspiring, also because it touched really our issues, and it really focused on how it's a circle in changing the narratives of the places and how art is crucial in changing this narrative. At the same time, in order to support art outside the central places and the central mechanism of art and its narratives and its articles and its media, it's important to find way to support them. So it's very, very crucial what you said, and I thank you very much. It was really very clear. Now I would invite to talk Isabella Anna Moren. Isabella is a writer, a curator, and a communication strategist currently based in Sicily. She works on the intersection of art and politics, and she's a member of the transnational production hub Studio Rizoma in Palermo, and curated the Syndicate Summit, a political event which brought together artists, researchers, and activists to conceive transnational alliances as part of the festival Between Land and Sea in 2021. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Giovanna. I'm very happy to be here, so thank you for the invitation. And I don't know if you know, but somehow this roundtable brings together or closes a circle. So we started with Hedwig, and in many ways Hedwig is the reason why I came to Palermo, which was to visit Manifesta and to write an article about it. And then I've been working there since more or less 2018, 2019. And the circle closes with an event that we will host at the beginning of June, which is about cultural restitution, and in which the first fellow that we will host will be Patrick Mudekereza, who's also involved with the Biennale of Lubumbashi and works in Congo. So it's was Art Center. Seeing that we're all in an afternoon dip, I want to line out what Studio Rizoma does, what we do in Palermo, and how we started to work, because I think it touches on a lot of issues that we've been discussing since this morning with a lot of organizations and projects that have a very established and long run. We are much younger in a sense, so we've been running from one pilot project into the second one. We all met in 2019, working in different capacities, not knowing each other, on the Biennale Arcipelago Mediterraneo in Palermo, which was communicated to the city basically 4 weeks before the start date. And as this conference was going on, somebody asked, well, how can we participate? And are there funds to support? Who wants to participate? And the answer was, well, you have 10 days to send an email, and no, there's no funds. And somehow, miraculously, in the context of Palermo, which is a small place, it's a big place, but it's also a small place at the same time. It has 1 million inhabitants, but nonetheless, it's an island in the south of Italy, a small city. 400 initiatives came together before the start of this Biennale, which was, I have to say, co-curated by European Alternatives and European NGO and Fondazione Merz. The city, however, was able to produce 400 initiatives. And we were incredibly impressed by this capacity. And we saw a lack, and we asked ourselves, well, what would happen if there was a container, a motor, something that could offer funds, support, opportunity and possibility on a continuous basis? And this is how we started speaking about Studio Rizoma. So in its biological context, the rhizome is a root system that can connect roots on the bottom under the ground, and it can produce shoots and flowers going up as an interconnected network, basically. We launched Studio Rizoma relatively unluckily at the very beginning of the pandemic, and so our first initiative was called Pandemos, which was a small grant project to support local or Sicily-based artists, as we had set out to do when we thought about Studio Rizoma originally. The project that I think became our case study and brought us to what I will tell you where we are now is Between Land and Sea Festival, which was a festival organized by us in Palermo, the Dream City Biennale in Tunis, and the Theater of Bremen in Bremen. So the concept was to have 3 port cities, some European, some not, all of them each of them more south of another or more north of another, depending on how you put it. And think about, okay, in this context, how can we create alliances? What are the differences that we must learn, that we can learn to overcome? What are the struggles that we already share? And we organized a 5-day event with an artistic programmation involving the new production of a theater piece, of various performances, of dance, and a political summit, which was the Syndicate Summit. The challenge was that normally you arrive with a sort of result, something to present. When we started Syndicate, we had 8 work groups, half composed of people from Sicily, half composed of activists, researchers, and artists from Tunis, having had some conversations in the beginning of how can we work together, but really no clear plan. And as we worked through these days and sessions, we were also realizing that there is a conversation to continue. And so maybe touching on the point between temporary and permanent event, because we couldn't host, the main idea was that we would host Palermo and Tunis at the same time and people could travel by boat to see them both. But because of the pandemic, Tunis had to postpone and we will have the event this year. The good thing was that it meant we had more time to really understand what it meant to work together and what our differences were. And so we developed, for example, one project that we've been now continuously working on for a year, which is the School of Water Scarcity, that brings together researchers from Tunis and artists and farmers also from Palermo, trying to articulate ideas, innovations, projects around the shared issue that we have of water scarcity. In a way, this festival brought us to a point where we realized, okay, it's not enough to do a temporary little, a limited event in that sense, but we must be able to succeed and guarantee continuity. And we had the lucky coincidence that we received structural funding from the Allianz Kultur Foundation, which allows us to plan and be in Palermo for the next 5 to 10 years with a network of local partners and international partners trying to promote the city of Palermo and its artists, but also graphic designers, furniture makers, a whole infrastructure that before didn't really have a place to work or sell, or often also left the south of Italy, which is something that is unlucky, but we know happens. It's a special moment to be here because we're launching the new foundation Studio Rizoma, at the end of this month, on the 31st of May. And we have decided to go ahead with a programmation of 3 central topics for 2 years. Each of these topics, which is decolonization, feminism, and the Mediterranean, together with environmental matters, acts as a container for smaller projects, so that on the one hand we can host ad hoc projects, local projects in different places, but we also have a long-term container to frame them and to communicate them. I would maybe for the moment stop here, and maybe there's a few more questions that we can go through later together. I would like to all invite you to join the first event, which is from the 3rd to the 5th of June in Palermo. It's called Non è più tempo di negare, and it is a whole program arranged on restitution together with screenings. There's a series of 15 short talks, which is curated by my colleague Eva Maria Berci. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. It's actually, I'm also, I just want also to underline, if you want to add a few words about your organization, how you work, because of course, besides the title, which is very evident, it's kind of a multidisciplinary group of people, and I think this leads us also connects to all. I mean, one theme that is very present in all the tables. So if you want to add a little bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In fact, I should have said in the beginning, I'm only 1/6 of Studio di Roma, so there's 5 people who... I'm only 1/6 of Studio di Roma, so there's 5 other stable colleagues and people that I work with. And in fact, I should have also added, as you said rightly, we all have very different backgrounds. So Lorenzo Marsili, for example, is a political activist, philosopher, and writer who has founded the NGO European Alternatives already 10 years ago, which was the reason we met in Palermo. Eva Maria Berci has been working a lot in the Congo. She's a dramaturg and organizes theater projects, mainly in Africa, but not only. Ségolène Prévost and Marta Chilero have been working in different capacities in Paris and Rome on feminist projects. So yeah, I guess we bring, myself, I have a background as a writer in design and architecture mostly, and let's say the way that space is used and who has the right or the power to use a certain space or not. And at the moment, this is our core team, and the way these 3 pillars, or nodes as we call them, are structured is that each of them has their own associate curator who takes care of them, who can invite other projects or other people to participate and expand.
Thank you, because this rhizomatic quality of things, it's a little bit central to these whole panels. And while researching, while inviting, we were all discovering that everyone else is basically almost connected to all the others on different levels, in different functions and multi-identity. Now we have a totally different project that is Altalena, Alessandro Polo, Andrea Magnani. And Altalena is a research project active from 2017, which organizes interdisciplinary activities with the aim of promoting and sharing while fostering exchanges among the participants, artists, curators, writers, historians. Since its foundation, Altalena has overcome the exhibition format in favor of shared spaces where intertwining different practice, producing speculative imaginaries, and preferring communitarism. Altalena has organized 2 residencies, a reading group, and has published 3 artist books. In 2019, it was featured in Teatrum Botanicum at the Pub Turin, and in 2021, it was selected for School of Waters Mediterranean 19 Biennial of Young Artists from Europe and the Mediterranean, San Marino, with the performance Manuport. So I'm very curious to hear from your voice a project that is really multi-format. It's in a way difficult to frame, so this makes it really interesting. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the invitation, first of all. And yeah, that was a good introduction. Like, I couldn't do better. But because I want to say that the invitation was kind of useful for us because it kind of triggered an inside conversation, because we are a group of mainly artists, and we are roughly 10 people, but we have the tendency to expand. And yeah, 9 artists and 1 art historian, basically. And and we never really spend time to try to find ourselves, and it's been always kind of shady and complicated the way we operate. And so I don't know, our activities have a different range, and I mean, our contribution to these panels, I think it can be like a perspective that is not a perspective of an organization, but more like a perspective for artists that they don't really, I mean, when we were talking about it yesterday, we were trying to understand what it could be, like, what we can say, actually. And it came out the idea that most of our activities are focused on not exactly to create an outcome, and not exactly to create a product, like to create something that then you present to the public, and it kind of need to be framed and kind of need to be shared, and it's more like activities that somehow help ourselves to grow as a little community, a little group, and in this, with this in mind, we always involved at the beginning new artists that they somehow took and joined the group, and then more and more other personality like a geologist or like a scientist, and somehow it's difficult. So for me, it's really complicated and difficult to define the way we operate.
Yeah, for me too. In fact, we were a bit surprised to be invited because we couldn't really, I don't know. Yeah, you hear me okay? Yeah, we felt it was a bit also difficult for us since we don't really, I don't feel we really have an identity. I think it's important to say that me, for example, I came in 2018 in invitation on another friend, part of Altalena. And as he said, we are mostly artists, but we never really speak of our practice. It's really something we set apart, and it has never been a criteria of selection, I guess. It really went through different friendship or sensations, let's say. And so we kind of found ourselves each time in smaller or bigger groups, depending. I didn't attend all the events Altalena produced since I'm inside, and so on the other end, other people didn't attend it or took part in other, so it's kind of liquid. And so yeah, it's really something that moved more from a proposition of one or two or three person of the group to start thinking about a specific subject or even just a place or an activity we would like to do. Also, I really have to say now it's a very bad comparison, but in the same way you might have, I don't know, like a group of friends with which you go play soccer in the Saturday evening, or you go, I don't know, yeah, singing, I don't know, whatever. So it's really kind of therapy group. It's another bad comparison, but so yeah, and I think also the pandemic somehow it really bounded more, and it reinforced this aspect of really slow process of consultation because of the we had to prepare for the Biennale Mediterranean in San Marino, that because of the pandemic was postponed continuously, and in the end I think it delayed almost 1 year, but we already started thinking of it. And so since this delay was endless, we just like spoke about possibilities endlessly, exactly through Zoom calls in the beginning, and then on persona when it was a bit more easy to meet. And I think this was also something that before we never intended or had the chance to do at such a slow pace, and since then I think it kind of became the way we work anyway. Now maybe we meet at the bar, but it's the same thing in the end. And so, yeah, we have the presentation.
Also, like
right?
during the pandemic, like maybe we can show some projects that's easier.
Yeah, because it's
I think also during the pandemic, like it's something that is not even on our website, but we organized this this listening group that basically we involved a piano player, and in like a small group of 3 people, she was playing in her bedroom, and we were there listening to her playing with the piano, and somehow after that we trying to explain what was the music about without knowing much about classical music. So this is like a sort of activity that we did, but it was just basically us and meeting with this piano player, and she was playing for us, and we kind of trying to criticize where we were listening, and opening a discussion, and that will probably bring to another project that we're going to do in the future. But yeah, maybe Ale, you want to talk about Otago?
Okay, yeah, Otago, I think it was 2018, and so that's actually the first time I got invited, so it was new. It was not Altalena, let's say, to keep this kind of sept mood. And so it was a sort of workshop, and we were, I think, 6 or 7 people, and the idea was to set ourselves to this alterated rhythm of 4 hours sleeping, 4 hour awake, 4 hours sleeping, 4 hour awake, all together. So we were just setting the, and we were just living in this mountain hut that a friend kindly put at our disposal. And each of the participants in these 4 hours had to propose an activity of whatever he wanted to kind of occupy the time, while 2 persons that were kind of outside were participating, but had the right, let's say, to be a bit less strict with the timetable, because they had to prepare the dinner or clean the dishes, while we were a bit more supposed to really fully concentrate in this process. And so it was very, I mean, like every activity was very different. Also, we didn't really knew, besides some other people that already knew each other, it was also a way of meeting, and everyone proposed a really very different thing. Me, maybe I was the most lazy. I just proposed to take a walk because no one else did, and I thought it was a healthy thing to do at the moment. And yeah, and that was it. And as you see, I mean, in the end, we don't really, maybe we don't give that much in return to the audience, in the sense that the document...
You're not really creating images like this.
Exactly. It's really just, yeah, maybe we have just a photo together after this.
That seems it, yeah.
Okay. And so, but I think that's also part of the thing, in the sense that we don't want to be exclusive, absolutely, but somehow I think that in this anonymity and in the in this close temporality of the here and now that is really there, there is a kind of value, and I think also, you know, it's this how to say, it's really also a way to kind of protect somehow the sensations and the impressions of the participant, and maybe also to maybe it can even inspire more someone else to do it the same way, without really giving a specific frame or what an outcome of this should be in our mind, because yeah, it's really like experimenting thing and failing.
Yeah, it's making me think that you know, like we're not really, like, we consider ourselves a sort of little community, and we kind of like, I think it's probably difficult to establishing a real dialogue with a community that you are not fully part of it. I mean, probably you can do a lot of studies, you can just like try and be there as much as you want, but if you're not, you know, identify yourself fully with that community or your group, in our case, like, it's like a group of friends, basically, a group of people that they come, you know, they became friends somehow. And then that we can try to change ourselves, to educate ourselves in a different way. And all our projects are somehow self-educational experiments. And maybe we can see the one for the Biennale, which is, yeah, this is the Young Artist Biennale of Mediterranean. And well, to talk briefly about this project, and we talk about it even too much, but at the end of the day, we were like trying to do something with the place we were interacting with, and so we somehow got in contact with this geologist, which Sara Rossini, which kind of help us to understand the place, understand what is the local mythology as well. And we wanted to work somehow with a theme that is the what's in English, like deep time, like the perception of like really long range of time, which is something really abstract for a human mind. You cannot even visualize what's like when the time is so long. And somehow we start studying the environment, and San Marino is built on this sort of crest of rock, which is called Monte Titano. And Sara, the geologist, she was talking about it. And what we organized is a hike with her.
Yeah, actually, she was already doing some
hikes,
touristic hikes as a tourist guide.
Yeah.
It was part of her daily life, so we kind of insert ourselves in something that it was a bit more...
Yeah, she was already doing hikes for tourists or for classes, for like schools. And as part of the biennial, we like print few like weird flyers that we spread around the city, and everyone can just call and somehow book her, and having a hike with her, and learn about the local geologist formation. But then we start talking with her, and something else, like a different needs, came out, and we kind of wanted to try to basically inlay a new tradition inside the mythology of the place. Since the place, it really looks like a sort of wave. I show you the picture. This is us. And it's called Manupart, which is a sort of, the project is called Manupart because it's a sort of practice that we sort of take, but also invented somehow, that basically Sara, during the hikes, add to the story of the classical story of the mythology of the place, also the geologist, her geologist studies about the place, this story that her ancestors were doing this little tradition to feed the wave somehow, so to find some stones or object at the bottom of the crest, at the bottom of the mountain, and bring it to the top in order to make this wave going more and more to the sea somehow, because from that you can see the sea. And
and actually on geological time, this hill is really moving towards the sea. Of course, it's not we don't have to worry in the sense that it's very long, but there is in reality, in this deep time, there is this rock is really floating on a very soft soil to the sea. And so we like to kind of exploit this scientific notion somehow, but to add some magical and ritual element, and to make like all the people that could eventually book this hike take part in this process, adding this rock symbolically to the top of the rock to kind of promote. And of course, like, we kind of flip it and say that the rock was made by millennium of people doing this, and so it's also a project on land art, maybe, I don't know. But
really slow pace.
Yeah.
But yeah,
where
but
you never
also
take credit, but
you know, it's like we create such a strong connection with Sara that she's now basically doing it all the time. She's like doing all she just decide, yeah, well, the biennial might finish, but I'm still gonna do it, and I'm still gonna trying to, you know, create this sort of poetic vision of the mountain, and
yeah, and also maybe the flyer that we spread in the city. I think that's really it came in second place. But as you see, we had to add some official official logos. Yeah, if I point there, you won't see. Anyway, but there are some official logos, and some other are just drawings. And I think it was also, I mean, of course, we place it also in some official venues, but we also place it all over, and I think it was a way to, yeah, it's part of the performance as well, because I don't think it's really trusty, as I imagine, it's not really official, so I think it demands you some effort to kind of trust and maybe call this number. So maybe we lost a bit of audience, but you know, we are for quality over quantity, but I don't know. But I think that was also part. It's a bit deceiving, and yeah. So.
I don't know if there's questions from the other.
Yeah, I don't think we have other slides, but yeah, let's see. And yeah, but yeah. Anyway, and then now that I mean. Another project just took place, and actually I was not part of it, and Andrea neither, but more for like organization, because of course we all have our
I was part of it.
Our duties and lives, and so we don't really put our self-limit in the sense that now we start this last project was in which we were not present, but I think maybe it's interesting because it was a sort of a workshop with this chemist. She's a biologist. No? She's a biologist that also wrote a book about intelligent matter. So all this sort of matter that have a sort of insight, intelligence, and so it was about, I don't know, like kind of fungi that can find their way, and other materials, and it was presented as a sort of didactic and experimental workshop in Fribourg, in Switzerland, with a small group of artists into an artist space, proper one, let's say, funded one. So we don't really have a format. Let's say that it always starts with a togetherness, but also from autonomous drives, and each of us, it's very, I would say, different, and we never intended to have any kind of view. I think it's really kind of in the middle, and so yeah, and also we have a lot of non-official members, so no. I don't know. I don't know what else to say actually.
Maybe they have some questions, or
maybe it's enough.
Yeah, I mean we can. I think it's you added a lot to the discussion, because I mean it's important, and we had another group in the other table who are basically acting as curators and Treti Galaxy in this very nomadic, almost invisible way. And I think I just wanted to sum up a little bit that during these two first tables, there are terms that came up many times, and invisible is one of the most frequent, and we had unuseful, we had autonomous, independent, anonymous, and I was thinking while you were talking that maybe if we had to rename our project, probably we would rename it Milano Re-Mapped, because while we talk, we realize, Marianna, that it's becoming more and more difficult to really frame and map things in this field that we're lucky enough to work in, and also also this tension that there has been between the necessity of defining, of framing, of setting a protocol, a field, but at the same time the natural need and probably attitude of sweeping through the lines and not wanting to be framed is one of the forces of art. I'm citing this book that I have on my table, which has been a guideline throughout this process, and and forces move between points that are in opposition, that are in contradiction. So I think it's really interesting the way that you almost anonymously interact with communities. And it was a little bit one of the subject of this table. Okay, there is Manifesta who has a statement very clear, and the fact that you don't want to have a statement, but in fact you relate to people, to single people, to very small groups, and between yourself, and you're forced to come out in a way because you're invited to talks or to Biennale and to share a practice that is very private, but it becomes collective in the moment that you share it with us, and it gives a lot of I think, hints and interesting suggestions. So thank you very much for being here. And I don't know if the public, someone has questions. Now is the moment for this table. Or Marianna, do you want to add something? No, you're save your energy for the next. So, or you want to, I mean, everything was extremely interesting and open up to so many questions. So we found another name for the project, so we're going to change this now. Milano Unmapped, because it's really very wrong to think that this can be mapped, and a mapped is static and we're moving. Do you want to add something, any of you?
You made me think that maybe like unmapping or being invisible is a sort of self-protection to all the like gentrification process. Like if you try to be invisible and if you try to not spread, like it's like when all the artists start going to in a bar, and then the bar slowly became famous, and the bar is fucked because then it turns into something else than it wasn't before. So like being visible and being somehow like cultivate more like a private dimension is somehow a form of self-defense from like those kind of dynamics. I don't know, that's what it came to my mind.
Yeah, but on the other end, I think that, yeah, maybe like this project also came as a sort of a non-competitive and slow space for us to kind of have a more, less tense way of acting, but in the end, I think it's also a way maybe to reinforce your previous practice, or to find motivation to then get back in the game, I don't know, in the sense that, yeah, I think that one thing needs the other, and in the end we are, I mean, yeah, beside this process and the anonymity, I think it's nice. I mean, there's a need for sociality, and also other necessities that cannot be avoided. So I think it's important to kind of do it your own, do it yourself, but also not be greedy or too not greedy. Yeah, selfish. I'm thinking of another word, but yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a small... We have a small pause to drink something and rest, and at 5 o'clock we have our third moment with Marianna Dovidio and the art of reimagining the space with architects and collectives again, because we are very fascinated by shapes and groups that are not immediately evident. So thank you, and we'll see you in half an hour. Thank you.